This is Dustin Pickering at the New York Parrot Literary Corner, and today we have the fabulous Gabrielle Langley, who her first book of poetry, Azaleas on Fire, was just released in 2019. She has won the Lorene Pouncey Award, Houston Poetry Fest's Jury Prize, and the Vivian Nellis Memorial Prize, with work appearing in a variety of literary journals and 3 Pushcart Prize nominations. Miss Langley was also a spearhead and co-editor for the anthology Red Sky, Poetry on the Global Epidemic of Violence Against Women, available from Sable Books 2016. And her website is gabriellelangley.com. So, Gabrielle, thanks for coming on today, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm really delighted to be here with you all.
So, if you want to, anything that's not in your bio that you want to speak, feel free to come out with, some additional information, maybe related to your poetry or anything you want to say about yourself that might be of interest to the viewers.
Okay. Yeah, I'm working on my second book right now. I would say I'm about 70% through. It's real exciting. I think once you get your first book out, that's an incredible accomplishment, and then it opens up a lot of new things for you to do with the next book. And I'm still very interested in some of the same themes. One of the things that's different, I found, when you have your first book out, and I've spoken with other poets about this, it tends to be perhaps a bit more autobiographical. Not in all cases, not every single poem, but there tends to be more of threads of your own life. And I found that once I got that book out, I became even more interested in doing persona poetry. So that's something that persona poetry, of course, being the tradition where the poet is speaking completely in the voice of another character. And what's fascinating about that is that the poet can often say things or express things behind that mask, so to speak, that they may not be able to express in any other way, and certainly not speaking as themselves. So that's something that's interesting me a lot lately. I live and work in Houston, Texas. Houston is, of course, a very amazing, complex port city. I've lived most of my life here, and I've seen the city change dramatically from the time I was a little girl. I was born in 1961, and I've seen the city become so much more diverse and so much more exciting and so much more sophisticated and cosmopolitan. And I think that has definitely had an impact on my poetry as well.
So with your first book, Azaleas on Fire, if I remember, you did a sort of a charity thing with that, where you donated the proceeds to, I think it was, what was it, the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation?
Yes, it's the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation. Yeah, the book is 100% of the proceeds, sales from this book go to that foundation. And the reason I chose to do that is because I'm fortunate enough to have a day job, so I can support myself reasonably well. And when the book came out, I realized that I was really standing on the shoulders of my mother, who started me reading poetry when I was she started reading poetry to me when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Of course, we know when we look at all of the research on it that one of the biggest predictors of how well children are going to do in school is how much the parents are able to read to them. And so I wanted to look for a foundation whose primary mission was literacy not only among children, but among adults as well. So I looked at many different agencies, and this was the one that really vetted out really well. I mean, they had I went on GuideStar. I had a friend of mine who's a financial advisor check them out, and they really are giving a lot of their proceeds directly to the clients. I mean, directly to, they provide libraries for children in low-income neighborhoods. They take the libraries to them and they just give them stacks of books.
That's wonderful.
And I just remember how important my books were to me when I was a little one, and I wanted to somehow give back, because it's the way you become a poet is to be a good reader.
Right.
Everything
Absolutely.
else comes. Yeah. In fact, I even have really close to me. This is it's an old beat up book, but this was my first poetry book that my mom got for me and started reading for me when I was a little kid. So the first poem I remember, and I remember memorizing it, was Wink and Blink and a Nod, but there are all sorts of other incredible classic treasures in here. So it's old and it's beat up, but it's traveled everywhere.
Right. There's a little memory there. That's very interesting to share. Thanks for sharing that. So what was the reception of your first book, Azaleas on Fire? What was that reception like? Did you have any reviews written, or what did people think? Or did anyone say anything?
Yeah, I was, well, of course, one of the things that you do when you have your manuscript ready, you have your book ready, you send it out for reviews. You send it out, the publisher will solicit what we call blurbs, which are the little things that are written on the back of the book. And so I was very fortunate. I had some beautiful, and that's a wonderful process when you're writing a book, because you're sending the book out and you're asking people to say something about it. And when you start getting the blurbs back, or the reviews or the blurbs back, it's real exciting. I was really, I would say three of the most meaningful ones were from the former Houston Poet Laureate, Robin Davidson, and then also Octavio Quintanilla, who's the San Antonio Poet Laureate, and also the Public Poetry's Fran Sanders wrote a beautiful review. So that's exciting. I haven't had any bad reviews yet, so hopefully people will continue to be very kind and positive and responsive.
That's wonderful. I think it's always good when people receive your work and actually, appreciate it and understand it, or at least have an idea. They get something of their own from it. And reminding poets today who are watching, today is World Poetry Day, and we have some other guests as well, which we will bring on. We have them here to perform for us later on. And so just keep tuning in and keep watching, and we'll keep that going. But moving on further, are there any interesting stories? You said the poems were very autobiographical. Are there any interesting stories from the poems? And another thing I'm curious about is, where did you come up with the title? What does it mean?
That was actually a lot of fun. It's a friend of mine, also a poet who lives here in Houston, Stacy Nigliazzo. She and I had books coming out at about the same time, and she told me, she asked me if I had a title for mine yet, and I said no. I said I don't, and she said yes. And she said, my editor told me it's a good idea to look for a line out of the poetry that you've already written in the book, and just take a line, see if a line or a couple of words stand out. And immediately when she said that, I knew it would be called Azaleas on Fire. And because it really captures a lot of the sense of the poems. There are a lot of flowers in the poems. They're very much of this region, of the Southwest Gulf Coast region that we live in. But the line itself comes from a poem that's in the book that's called Lipstick. And I had been thinking ever since I was a little kid, I used to like, whenever I go shopping with my mom, and I'd like to go in the drugstore and look at the titles of of the lipsticks, because they're very poetic. I mean, if you've ever shopped for lipsticks, which y'all probably perhaps have not, but they have these wonderful titles like Cherries in the Snow or Fire and Ice, and I always thought it'd be fun to name lipsticks. I did a poem called Lipstick, and I actually made up my own names lipsticks, and one of them that I made up was Azaleas on Fire. And that was just part of that poem. It's just a celebration of the color and women or men for that matter, you know, putting on their war paint, you know, but in a positive way. I mean that not that we're literally going out to fight, but that kind of thing, that ritual of putting on lipstick is, and I wanted to explore that. So it was a very playful poem, but that's where that title comes from. And of course, we have azaleas here in Houston. We have an entire azalea festival here in Houston. They grow, they grow all over the area where I live.
So I'm also in Houston, so I know a little bit, but for our viewers, what is the Houston poetry scene like? I mean, how vivid is it? What kinds of poets do we have, you know, floating around?
Well, I mentioned diversity, and Houston, keep in mind, is the 4th largest city in the United States. I think we're soon to be 3rd largest. So I've heard some people say that the Houston poetry scene rivals, you know, it is almost at a point where it rivals New York. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's incredibly diverse. One of the things that you see poets of all ages, and I mean everything from poets who are teenagers to college age, all the way into poets in their 70s, 80s, and above, and 90s even. So that's real exciting. You see, I don't think there's any one way to describe poetry in Houston. It's obviously you have some are page poets and some are performance poets, and some crossover. I think it's important. I don't like that dichotomy of you're either a page poet or you're a performance poet, because I think we can all learn from each other. My work, for example, is more traditionally lyrical, which makes it more page poetry, but I am influenced all the time by hearing slam poets, by listening to performance poets. And there's something about the rhythms, and there are some poems that I've written specifically to be performed. And
yeah, so speaking of slam poets, we have and performance poets, we would like to introduce one of our performance poets here. Uche Uwadinachi, I hope I pronounced that right. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit and do a piece for us? He's from Nigeria, so it's late there, I've heard, and so we want to get you on and get you moving and doing your thing. So go ahead.
I think you got the first one, Uche, and the second, the surname sounds Uwadinachi.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Uwadinachi. Okay.
So I'm going to be doing a poem. I'm going to be doing a poem I did one day when I got to the farm. So watching the earth, it's a kind of my complaint about what the situation of the country is. So the earth becomes like a witness to my petition against what is happening, the situation around. So this is the poem. Aliwa, Aliwa, how do I pledge this love? How do I pledge this love with broken teeth and clapped fingers to bite phonemes at this early youth? Finding not one old wheelchair to move my dry gleams all free. You mind a pipeline with pipeline sensor the rest of our hope in existence, casting us away from our villages to the city garages, left in local market for your supermalls, supermarts, cinemas, and cyber malls. No standing, no walking, no loitering. Keep moving. So you teach us how to love and when to die for the country. Now I hear your new song, free education, free education, free education. Your flags are flying, glued to our drop arms, unable to wipe tears of children in public school, reciting your scripted tunes to your million manifest tunes. Come, do you think we're all fools? Okay, where are the waters? Where are the waters you drain from our rivers to be filtered to flood those market followers and kekela pep you offered? Instead, our testicles are ignited in the same scarce petrol to be exploded in the headlines of our news lines. Now my babies and families become effigies of littering carcasses in the streets, and you still go talking about another electoral policy? Please. Give me my ex back, give me my life back, and let me decide how to start a new life. Thank you.
That was beautiful, passionate, wonderful. I had trouble with my thing here. It just pops me over here, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. So we can go back to Gabrielle. How did you feel about being nominated for the Pushcart by the editorial board?
Oh, excited. It was a little bit different. As I understand it, I've had 2 other poems nominated by editors of journals, but this is a little bit different because it's the editorial board is nominating for the poet, not just a single poem, but it's your body of work. Mm-hmm. And so that was exciting, really exciting, and I'm kind of speechless about that. Very humble, very, very honored. And I had they asked you to send with that nomination, they asked you to send tear sheets from your whatever's been published that year in another journal. So I sent my tear sheets. I'm kind of hoping I have a poem that I'm really, really proud of, and I'm kind of hoping that that's the one that they may choose to publish. We'll republish rather. It's from this book. It's the poem. It's about a character. It was, her name is La Malinche. She's a character from Mexico, from the Aztec region, and she became the translator. She was first trafficked as a child, as a slave, actually as a sex slave. She was trafficked during the Spanish, when the Spaniards invaded, and she was sold from one tribe to another, and she was given by that tribe. Her parents sold her, and then that tribe gave her to the conquistadors, and she ended up becoming, she was very, very bright, very intelligent woman, and she ended up becoming the translator for Hernan Cortez. And I really wanted to write something sensitive to her story because she's considered by many in Mexico to be a traitor because she chose to translate the Indian dialects, and she learned Spanish, and she's considered by many to be a traitor. But I think when you look at the sheer survival that she had to go through, you begin to, if you put yourself in her feet for just even a few minutes and understand what she had to go through as a child and as a young woman just to survive that experience, I have utmost respect for her. And so the poem is really an homage to her. And a way of looking at it differently.
Is it a persona poem or is it more of a?
It is a persona
I was going
poem.
to say I thought it probably was. It's very interesting to hear the stories behind some of these poems. And would you like to read us a poem or two, maybe?
I would love to. Do you want me to? I can read La Malinche if you have that right here. Turn my light up a little bit. La Malinche translates for Hernan Cortez. When your own people sell you off to another tribe, you have to learn a different language. And when that tribe gives you, as one of 20 girls, a gift to the Spaniards, you learn to conjugate. You find yourself face down on a Spanish pillow. So you spend that time conjugating all the new verbs. You learn how to bury your face in a field of marigolds. You learn to escape the smell of your own blood. The Spaniards in the Mexica, they are fierce. Warriors are always celebrated. But when a new race comes spilling from between my legs, I will be blamed for surviving this war. You Spaniards bring horses and steel. You have watched Montezuma's priests use obsidian blades, slice through sternum, cut the still beating heart from a prisoner. But whose tribe is ever really strong enough or brave enough to protect the life of one small girl? My only weapon is the velvet edge of my tongue. I have learned to use what I have. I have learned to use both sides well. The parents who sold me away, they called me Tenepal, the talkative one. My own children will learn to translate my name as traitor. But what no one will ever know is how the new words form in my mouth like sharpened stones, how I cannot wait to spit them out, or how the words I cannot speak have been scratched into the margins of someone else's poem.
Wow, that's beautiful. I do hope you succeed with that one and get the published into the Pushcart anthology. That's a great poem. So today is World Poetry Day, and we have Gabrielle Langley. So I just want to say that we're glad to have you, and we'll elaborate a little bit on today being World Poetry Day for us. That's a very special day, an honor for all of us. So moving on. How do you think, and this is sort of a social question, there seems to be, you're writing in a voice, and there seems to be a kind of consciousness emerging now about appropriation and the Me Too movement going on, and sort of changed a lot of the dynamics of poetry. How do you feel that poets should be writing, from your perspective, also as a editor of a violence against women anthology? How do you feel poets should be responding to the current consciousness going on?
My hope, my belief is, and my hope that it will continue, poetry is always responding to something at some level. The Violence Against Women anthology was, I thought, incredibly important because we had no idea that we were going to get so many submissions. We ended up with close to 1,000 submissions, and with a single call. And we received poems from all over the world, and it was, and clearly a lot of them were based on real life stories that women had experienced. So I think poetry in that case gives, particularly if the writer is an actual victim, whether she's writing about her own story or someone else's story, a chance to take your story back. It's a chance for a victim to say, I am going to be writing, I choose the words that are spoken. I choose exactly how the lines of this poem look on this page. I choose how it sounds. It's taking your story back, because that's one of the things that violence, not just towards women, but to anyone, violence and trauma toward anyone takes their story away from them. Being able to write it is a way of taking the story back. At the same time, I hope that we don't think, oh, the only way you can write poetry is to write politically. I think that's important. I think we need to have poets speaking, but in the political realm and speaking out against oppression. But I also believe, for myself personally, I have to be able to also celebrate other things. I have to be able to celebrate beauty. I have to be able to celebrate silly things. You know, you think about somebody like Pablo Neruda, who wrote odes to tomatoes or odes to artichokes.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not able to celebrate the beauty that we can find in this world, as well as explore and bring to light the trauma and the oppression, and it seems all for naught. So,
Right.
the idea of saying what a poet should do, I resist that a lot, because not all of my poetry is political.
Right. Right.
And in fact, more of it is personal than political. Although I do find, I do find myself looking at political things. I grew up during the Cold War, and we were under constant threat of, especially here in Houston, because we were so close to, we had NASA and the space program going on. We were under constant threat of nuclear atom bombs being dropped on us. As a child, that was the thing I remember, is that I would go to school and maybe the bomb would come that day, and we would go up in a mushroom cloud, and I would never see my family again. So I have a poem. In fact, that poem was just published today in Willowa Journal.
Oh, and wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I'm incredibly excited about that. But it was about being a child who saw the Bolshoi Ballet when they were allowed to tour. And it's hearing the adults talk about Russians and Cold War and atom bombs, and going through the atom bomb drills that we had to go through in school, never knowing if they were drills or not, or if the bomb was, was on its way toward us. And I started thinking about that, because you hear about children now being afraid to go to school because of school shooters. And I heard somebody talk about, well, I don't want my child to go to school and have to go through shooting drills. And I remember talking to my brother at the time, and I was like, yeah, well, we didn't, I don't think our parents wanted us to go through bomb drills either. And yet there we were.
So, right. So today is World Poetry Today. We have another guest, Reviere Koniecki. If you'd like to unmute and tell us a little bit and move into your performance.
Oh, thank you for having me. So I have two short poems. I've been thinking a lot about my mother lately. And so when I write, it's more or less an act of discovery. So I give myself like the process of it. It'll give me like the vocabulary that I need to describe what I'm going through internally. So these are new poems, and I don't have titles for them yet. So that's a work in progress. But the first one, this is the first one. One time I fought back. I hit your father so hard, I might have broken his jaw, my mother says matter-of-factly. A paper crane takes flight over her sun-crowned head. She kneels in front of the tree of knowledge. Her glasses slide down her nose. She pushes them back up and picks a sock out of the basket at our feet. We are hanging laundry. She works rhythmically, pinning our undergarments to the line, the parched gray city fading behind her. Water flows from her cup easily like music, and I feel less alone. and I wonder if I deserve it. Our sheets are as lonely as ghosts, billowing boneless bodies, clothespins spread apart like buoys, markers defining the threadbare line between enough and drowning. And here's the second one. When eating became an act of rebellion, my mother wrote the school an excuse for my appetite. It's bigger than a swarm of locusts, she explained, and then tried to quantify my wanting. She blamed my father for leaving, for not loving her enough, while weaving palms that used to be wetlands, whose rivers and tributaries have been gentrified like the breasts of old beauty queens. It's not so much the walls that divide as it is the area around it. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they walk. When my doctor points at my feet and tells her student, it's very painful. I feel seen.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I especially enjoyed that second one. That was Reverie Koniecki. And we'll let Uche do another one for World Poetry Today. Highly emotional poem there.
Okay, I'll be doing the second poem titled Walls of Unending Scars. Now, this poem is about the experience of some people who were locked during the NTAS protest. It's that's a protest against police brutality in the country that happened some months back. So the title of the poem is Walls of Unending Scars. I have seen the four walls coated with gory handprints of criminals and suspects, inscripting awkwardness, pleading for a public presentation. I hear slogans and they were screaming, "We die innocent. I was here. And so what? Are you the president? Them could fire me now today. Save us." My head smooths as ravaging odor of sheets and urine. Shooters me to worship at the walls of unending scars with my own crazy words. Hell is cell, because it is the black hole built into a black hole, built for the born convict, beauty of life only because we want him to survive. I see red flames at night, yellow coal for eyes, waiting flames at night, police for the burning of already hot hearts, police, pool of what, list of crimes, they catch and lock our lives in the blotting black hole of a cell. And they make they turn the earth into walls of prison, locking us all in, forgetting that the walls, the graffiti still screams, talking about our pains, still screams about the feet on the streets, marching, screaming that today, tomorrow no more. If I die today, tomorrow I will die no more. Thank you.
Thank you, Shay. Oh, passionate, very passionate, beautiful. So we have about a remaining 4 minutes or so. So I guess, Gabriel, if you want to tell us where we can find your book, and any last little words of advice for the upcoming generations of poets.
Sure. Yeah, this Azaleas on Fire and also Red Sky are both available through Sable Books. You can link to Sable Books at my website at GabrielleLangley.com. And in terms of advice for young poets, my gosh, read.
There you go. Can't do it anywhere.
Poetry, read other things too. Read the newspapers. Read everything. Read novels. Read Russian novels. Read anything you can get your hands on. Read speeches, famous speeches, We are all about the celebration of words and about recombining words in new ways to tell our stories. So that would have to be my best bit of advice.
Excellent. And our host has a poem to speak of he would like to present.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the platform. Today is our day. So as sports, we always want to also voice for the world to also get our message. So I have a very short poem, not really too long. It's titled, Don't Draw the Line. So I'm just going to briefly present that and then we run it up.
Today is World Poetry Today. So we're having a great discussion, as well as we had some performers. Thanks to Uche and Reviere. Thanks very much for joining us today. And tomorrow's guest is Angie Riley, I believe. Tomorrow is Monday. We have less than a minute.
Here comes the poem. The goals of the sun pave ways for the moon. Without clouds under the same sky, no dome. No battle lines drawn amongst the dwellers of the sky. No grumble, no tumble, as they tread in peace, no cry. Don't beat the war drum, not draw the battle line. Even if with your neighbors you don't dine. If class with fools resort to saying peace and bye. Pull not their legs, let the sleeping dogs lie. Even in darkness, the moon cohabits with the stars. So light